All right, it looks like we are now live. Good, sound good. Cool. So today is going to be another just kind of hangout stream where I'm just going to be screwing around, making some music, making some sounds. I don't really know what I'm going to be doing yet, but anybody who is out there and wants to ask questions or got topics that they want to talk about, I am here for it. So double check, make sure all my settings look good. Looks good. This looks good. Cool. All right. So let me figure out what I want to be doing. What have I not played around with for a while? I feel like I want to get back into some of the inspired by nature stuff. Is bouncy notes is treating me well. A little bit more appealing. This, get a little filter frequency action going. Cool. So let's get back in here, get some motion going in direction. Let's put this in E minor, G minor. I think the auto's fine. A little bit. Faster. Longer. Get random here. Back a random. A little too chaotic. Down a little bit. Bouncing. Make this quarter range there. Keep this there. Cool. That's good enough for a starting point, and then toss some more play on it just to make it better. That's what I want. Put the note link here, see what happens. Sure. Let's play the beat a little bit. Too slow. We stacked arpeggio with it. change this smaller, and then this to be a little smaller. That's actually kind of cool. Play down a little bit. All right, too much bouncing. Make it shorter. That actually looks pretty cool. That's getting there. It's very, I don't know what I'm going for here, but with gravity a little bit, see what happens. Hey Chuck, how's it going? It sounds pretty cool. Let's go that direction. Yeah, too much. Up here. How's everyone doing out there today? That's actually fairly pleasant. I'm not mind this here. Filter, that was good. Chaotic. That's cool. You can spell Zaak however you want, and people always mess it up. What are you up to, Chuck? How's your day going? Good, I hope. All right, might have gone too far with the bouncing notes. Rein it in a little bit. There we go. Back down. Chuck, right now I'm just gonna screwing around with the bouncing notes, just trying to make some cool arpeggiated kind of stuff. But feel free to toss any questions in the chat if you got anything. Otherwise, I'm just gonna be making some weird noises. Yeah, the bouncy notes I played around with a little bit last stream, and it's super fun, especially when you combine it with something like the arpeggiator. That way, I just hold down one note, and every time it receives a new note, it adds in new bouncing notes. So if I just play it without the arpeggiator, these nice, cool little echoes with it. But the arpeggiator plus this gets some really crazy stuff, and the settings on this thing can get really crazy really fast. So you have to like dial it in little by little, and once you do that, I think it works really well. Actually, let me try adjusting the range on this. See if we get more of a refined range in here. Yeah, so it's arpeggiator first, and then bouncy notes, and then just a pretty basic wavetable patch, and then I also have a little bit of delay just to make it sound a little bit more trippy. You get it very like Philip Glass kind of arpeggiators real fast. I literally just started a couple minutes ago, so or like 10 minutes ago. So you are right on time. Yeah, I spent a lot more time explaining about this in the stream last week, but I started a couple minutes ago, so you're not missing much. Yeah, Philip Glass, yeah, the Mishima soundtrack, one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Very kind of similar kind of thing. I guess his are a little cooler than mine, but I kind of want my patch to be a little better, so let me want this to be a little cleaner. I think I just want to go pure triangle. Get a bit more of that kind of lucky thing going on. Mishima is a film. I forget who directed it, but Philip Glass did the soundtrack to it, and it is a fantastic film. Really interesting story about a Japanese author named Mishima, and the soundtrack is fantastic. So I'm digging that. We play some that. It's a little. All right, how do I make this cooler? How do I make this a little bit more interesting? I like what I got so far. Maybe more unison, more detail in unison. A little less filter. That could work. This could work as like a patch, I think. I'm playing around with the Mishima. That is correct. No worries. Chuck, I'm just gonna be chilling here. Take your time. All right. I'm feeling like I want to do something a little different here, but I might save this as a thing first. Get rid of that and just go pure arpeggiator. I kind of want to see what happens if I go faster here. Go down the tempo a bit. There you go. It's a little more, feels a little more modern. Yeah, no worries. That reminds me of the Daft Punk Tron soundtrack. Not sure. I didn't promote or advertise the stream on social media or anything today, so I'm not sure if it will show up. But yeah, if you got any questions about anything, arpeggiator related or otherwise, feel free to let me know. Because like I said, I had some stream issues last week where if I do too many things inside of live, sometimes my mic just cuts out. It's like a weird CPU thing that like my CPU overloads and it desyncs the stream from the microphone, and it's a huge pain in the butt. So I'm trying not to get too deep into like building a huge session, but doing things like sound design and smaller things is totally fine. So I am just gonna be messing around. But if you have any questions or topics you want to cover, feel free to let me know. All right, let's take that, capture it. Let us just do a bar of each one of these guys. This guy here. Shorter. I really like the live arpeggiator, and I think it's just because I've been using it for a really long time. I think you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. But I would definitely love to see an updated arpeggiator. That would definitely be towards the higher end of my list of things that I want to see happen in live. Get a little hybrid reverb in here. Hey, Jazel? Bouncy notes is dope, but it's definitely tricky. It you have to like get these settings just right, and if you do, it can sound really cool. I don't know if you were watching from earlier, but I was just using bouncy notes on this, and you can get some cool stuff out of it, I think, but it's tricky for sure. Chuck, you want swing in the arpeggiator? It has a swing feature in here where you can add swing to it, depending on the gate. Actually sounds dope. I'm actually kind of digging that. And then depending on the gate, if you turn this down, you can make it more obvious with less gate. $32 won't work here. So I'm not using bouncy notes anymore. I took the bouncy notes off. Yeah, if you could get grooves from the groove pool into the arpeggiator, I would feel very happy about that. That would be a super cool way to update the arpeggiator. I think it'd be really sick. Well, it looks like we got a bunch of people showing up. Welcome everybody, Juan, Tripathi, and others. So Tripathi was asking about vocal processing chain. How do you handle that aspect of production? That is a fantastic question, and I think that there are a lot of different directions that you can go with vocal processing, and it depends almost entirely on what style of music you're making and what your own like personal voice is. I think that sometimes, you know, as a producer, you want to go very light on the vocal processing because you want the vocals to sound really kind of like clean and clear. Whereas sometimes if you're making like, you know, hyper pop or, you know, more kind of stylistic styles of music, you can go like really over the top with the vocal processing. Unfortunately, I don't have any really good vocal samples on this computer, any like raw vocal samples, but that's definitely a topic I might cover in a future video because it seems like there's a lot to do there. But I can go over some of the basics, I guess. If I have any good vocal examples on here. Let me check a folder and see if I have some unprocessed vocals that I could use that are from a while ago. And I have the vocals, but they're all processed. It's going to be not as interesting. Yeah, let me see. Next stream, I'll dig up some vocals and actually like demonstrate it for you. I think the main three things that I associate with vocal processing are going to be EQs, because there's going to be a lot of unwanted frequencies in almost any vocal recording, even if it's really clean. Compression to make sure you get a nice consistent volume. And then for me personally, reverb. Getting the right amount of reverb where it is kind of like subtly enhancing the sound. That I think is going to be really key for just making your vocal sound really solid. So those three effects are like my go-to for almost any vocal processing. But I will definitely dive deep into it because that's something I haven't talked about for a while with people. So I will definitely make my way back around to that. So okay, so it seems like people are wanting to talk about arpeggiator and what I have going on here. This guy. So all I have right now is the arpeggiator here with 16-note swing, gate, well, the gate you can control to basically affect the amount of swing. So if you want to change the kind of swing rhythm, this will affect it, depending on which kind of swing you have set up. But you can also just run it straight without the swing, and you don't. Also, still sounds pretty good. And then the other thing is the steps turned up to 3. So this is really, really important. This is one of my like secret weapons when it comes to putting together an arpeggiator or just making a cool arpeggiated sound, is that if your steps is set to 0 and I play 3 notes, it's going to alternate between 3 notes in that chord, right? Just 3 notes. But if I have a steps of 1, it's going to play the note that I'm playing plus another note, the distance set here, which is 1 octave. Yeah, there's no percentage of swing here, but if you have the swing setting turned on, the gate will affect the rhythm of the swing. But if there's no swings turned on, then the gate just affects the length of your MIDI note. So if I have steps of 1 and distance of 2, if I play one chord, it's going to play 6 notes, the chord I'm playing, plus another chord an octave higher. If I have a steps of 2, it's going to play this chord plus another chord plus another one higher. So it's going to play 9 notes, even though I'm only playing 3. What's up, Emo? How's it going? So now if I'm just, again, playing this one chord, you get these really complex sounding arpeggiators with basically doing no work by just adding more steps here. You can get this big, wide range of frequencies and notes in your arpeggiators, and good to go. So I love using the steps control. I don't use it all the time, but a lot of the time it can work great, especially if you switch up the style to, like, I don't know, down and up. You get all these different patterns, and it sounds pretty good. Other than that, I just have a wavetable here, triangle sounds, or triangle waveform with a really fast volume envelope, I think sounds really good. You get this nice kind of like really pretty sound. A lot of times if I do the same thing with like a saw wave or a square wave, it sounds like very electronic, which is cool. Sometimes that's what you want to go for, but just going with the triangle wave, you get this very pretty sound that I think works really well for it. So all I really did here is I adjust the volume envelope to make it nice and like quick and percussive. And then I also have the filter, low pass filter turned up, and then envelope 2, the slightly different envelope pattern going to the filter frequency, which also gives it this nice kind of plucky sound. And then other than that, the only thing I've really done here is I turn on the unison on classic mode, 4 voices, amount, it's up to you. Can which part be automated, Chuck? I think the chat is a little behind what I'm talking about, so I need a little bit more clarity in terms of what you're talking about. But number of voices and the amount here, we can change this. With the filter like this, we're not hearing it so much. But this can add a nice little bit of like detuning to it, which can be really nice. And then other than that, I added the hybrid reverb, but I haven't tweaked any settings yet, so this is just the default setting. I was planning on getting into that, and then I also just have a regular delay. I just switched the time from 3/16 notes to 2/16 notes, turn on the feedback, and turn on the dry wet a little bit. Yeah, so you can automate the wavetable here if you want, for sure. So you could either automate it by just like actually going in here and automating it manually if you want it to like shift around. Or you could modulate it with either your LFOs or your envelopes in here. So we have oscillator position, so we could apply like an LFO to it. Turn this up. Let me slow this down. Yeah, something like that. So that's the whole chain. That's all I have here. It's nothing too crazy quite yet. But again, this is a good starting point, I think, for a lot of like nice kind of like plucky sounds. This song always reminds me of Des by Niels Fromm's. Fantastic song where he uses these really pretty arpeggiated triangle sounds that sound kind of like this. All right, welcome, Steve-O. Chuck was asking about, so when capture arpeggio MIDI note, I start with MIDI track, then apply a swing. Yeah, absolutely. So you can totally grab the MIDI coming out the arpeggiator to another MIDI track. You just take an empty MIDI track here, grab from the other track, and then record enable it. Why are we not getting the post effects? Going in there, because it's in a rack. There we go. So yeah, you could totally take this and then start adding some swing to it if you wanted to. Hey Henry, how's it going? Yeah, this is a really fun way to, if you're dealing with an arpeggio like this, where like it's got some cool stuff, but I want it to be even more interesting. You could like get rid of random notes in here, or you could like switch notes up. So this one goes up, here, and maybe this one goes over here. Just hit the fold button, and kind of go through and like switch it up so you get a not entirely random arpeggiator, but you get something a little different. And then we'd have to go in here and take this, put it in here. You can get a little bit more chaotic with your arpeggiators, so it's not exactly like the exact same thing. It is super fun. Cool. So that was kind of a long explanation of what I got going on here so far, but hopefully that's helpful. No, check. It's totally cool. This is time for you guys just to kind of like hang out and ask questions about whatever it is you got in your mind. Do an example of putting groove on specifically something like those MIDI arpeggiators. Let me re-record that. Then. So taking something like this and then applying groove to it. Groove on MIDI. So we can just go to our grooves folder here. Find just like a swing. Apply that there. Henry, the way I recorded it here is you basically just take any MIDI track, and in the MIDI from, you can grab MIDI from any other MIDI track. In this case, I grabbed from this one here. This is the track with the chords and the arpeggiator on it. And then make sure you grab post effects. So if it's pre-effects, it'll be record the chords. If it's post effects, it'll grab the arpeggiation. And then you would just record like you would anything else. So I have my monitor set to auto, record enabled it, and just recorded directly there. Yeah, this is a super fun thing to do if you're doing lots of weird MIDI effects. Like if you're doing like either the random or the scale device, all that kind of stuff. And you can just kind of basically bounce out the MIDI on a separate track. And then I want to add groove here. Why am I not? There we go, 16 note grooves here. So then if I wanted to apply this groove, I could hit the commit button, and you can see that is going to then apply the groove to these notes. So I can do that one more time. So Command Z to undo that. So find a groove that you like. So this is a 16th note arpeggiation, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so I want to find a 16th note swing. So I'm going to find one of these 16th note swings over here. Like a pretty heavy one. And then you can either click and drag it onto the clip like this, or you can click and drag it down here. Now we'll be able to hear it, but we won't be able to see it. And then if you want to actually see it, I can hit this little arrow for committing it, and then you can see the timing of these has changed to get us our swing in there. So you definitely can apply swing to an arpeggiation, but it takes a few steps. Hey Chapati, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully I'll see you again next time. since I got a bunch of people here right now, the stream schedule is more or less officially Tuesdays today. It's just like a hangout, talk about stuff kind of stream. And then Fridays are song feedback streams. So if you want to get feedback on your tracks, same time on Fridays, I'll be just reviewing people's tracks. All right, so we got a couple questions going at the same time. I'm going to try and make sure I get to all of them, but I apologize if chat is moving and I don't catch everything. So Cods is asking about warping acapellas from the 70s, since the audio is in multiple pieces, and warp each piece. So warping acapellas, especially pre-1980s, can be very, very tricky, and I absolutely do recommend the method you're mentioning, where you basically slice different either verses or even phrases, and as long as you make sure that the start of the phrase is on time, then it will make your life a lot easier. Don't try to warp all of the acapella, because they're going to speed up and slow down. I was actually just working on a remix of Bill Withers' Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone, and his timing changes every single verse, and so we had to chop and slice each one. I might even have some good acapellas for this, so we can try this out. It might get me a copyright strike, but whatever. Acapellas. I have.
There's always sunshine when I dance with you.
And there's a bunch of reverb on it.
There's always.
Oh, we'll find something. I have all these acapellas, and I have no idea what most of them are. There we go. Aretha Franklin. This should be.
Rescue me from your bad love. Rescue me.
That's going to be really hard to work. So yeah, so something like this, where you have an acapella and you're going to try to warp this. I'm not going to try to warp it in front of you guys because it's going to be very difficult. But basically, go through and slice up different phrases. So like this looks like the start of a phrase. So slice it here, so probably like here. And then make sure the timing at the start of this phrase is on time. And then make sure that like key moments in this phrase are also on time. So something like that. But don't try to do every single word. Don't try to do every single part of it, because it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And then same thing, like go in here and like, okay, this looks like a phrase. I'm going to try to like just focus on warping here to here, make sure that's roughly on time, and then move on to the next thing. So that's kind of what I'd recommend for warping acapellas, is do it slice by slice in bite-sized pieces as best you can, and don't worry about getting perfect. Just make sure that the key moments, the key words are on time, and then you should be pretty good to go. And if you can find the original tempo of that song, that will definitely help guide you in terms of like knowing roughly what your segment BPM should be. So hopefully that answers your question. It's super tricky, but and fairly time consuming. But if you do it right, it makes your life super easy for doing this kind of thing. So Chuck was asking about group pool. I'll get to that in just a moment once I catch up with chat. So Emma Sanchez was asking about FL Studio and Ableton and the major differences between them. FL is honestly one of the only DAWs I do not have a lot of experience with. I have a lot of students who I've worked with in the past who started with FL and then they move over to Live, and they generally pick it up very quickly. I think there's a lot of commonalities between them in terms of a lot of the basics of audio production, synthesis, sound design, arrangement, all this kind of stuff. So in terms of the actual differences, maybe other people in chat would know a little better than I would, but unfortunately I do not have a huge amount of experience with FL to compare them. I've used, like I said, almost every other DAW besides FL. Yeah, using the original song alongside the acapella, like DJ mentioned, is a great way to help with that. Chuck, I probably cannot share these acapellas anywhere here, but perhaps in the Discord, if you want to join the Catalyze Discord, if you're not already in there, I can probably pop a link in there at some point if you ask nicely. Click shout out. The Discord link should be in the description below. So Keelan was asking, is there a way to save a default setting on sampler/plugins Ableton so that when they load up, they show up the saved settings? A couple people already, looks like they answered this in chat, but absolutely. If there are certain settings that you like, for example, my EQ8, I always like to have the harsh low cut here as part of my default EQ8. You just right click on it. First off, you change the settings to be whatever settings you want. You right click on it and hit save as default preset. And then that way, every single time you open it up, it'll by default have those settings. There's a number of the live devices that I've adjusted the default setting to so that they just load up the way they are. Yeah, so Henry and Nijijima already beat me to that one. Yeah, I had a conversation earlier. I was teaching a high school class randomly this morning on the internet, and we're talking about like difference between different DAWs and what they actually mean. And I'm very much a believer that it's the person using the tool rather than the actual tool itself. So if you are proficient, if you spend the time with any of the DAWs, it doesn't matter. People make dope music with every single DAW out there. People have made amazing songs with like Audacity. It's like you can do whatever you want with the tools that you have at your disposal. I think a lot of it comes down to how do the tools work and how does the workflow fit with your personality and your own workflow. Yeah. I'm just cranking through these questions. So Killen's saying that the EQ works, but simpler never saves the settings. Interesting. I will test this out and see what happens. So for example, if we switch this up to have a low cut or low pass like this, and then we save as default, and then I delete this and I open up simpler. Yeah, so that stays there. Maybe if you have a sample loaded up in here, it won't save the sample as part of it. But almost any of these settings, I think, should save with it if you like do something like this. Save as default. You can override it. Yeah, so it's saving all these settings. So I'm not sure if it's just bugging out for you, or maybe you're picking one or two settings that don't save as part of the default. Maybe something sample related. But seems to be working for me. Yeah, I tried just about every DAW before I tried Live. I tried Reason, I tried Pro Tools, I've tried Logic, I tried all kinds of stuff, and then Live was just always the one. It was meant to be. Yeah, try it out. Let me know if it's being weird, but that should totally work fine. Resave this. Chuck, we can get back to bouncy stuff. I think you were also asking about, I think I've caught up to all the questions in chat. If I missed anybody's question, just pop in the chat again, and I apologize. But you're asking about Groove Pool, I think, as well, if I'm not mistaken. Because we can totally talk about Groove Pool. Groove Pool will be a semi-deep dive. I mean, we can talk about some of the basics pretty quick. Not too complicated. All right, let me grab a drum rack. Anything specific about Groove and Groove Pool, or just got a general overview? So Groove, I think, is really interesting because, and I could be prepared for me to rant a little bit, because it's kind of like the opposite of quantization, right? So when you're quantizing things, you're taking things that were off of the grid and then moving them onto the grid, which is cool, but oftentimes it sounds a little stiff and a little bit robotic, right? Like this is just, no, it's just not that exciting. I mean, we got time now, so we're gonna do a medium dive into Groove and Groove Pool because I think it's a fun topic. And I appreciate all the people in the chat who are answering questions and helping out. I want this to really be about a community and people helping each other out rather than just me just ranting about things like. So appreciate all you guys for being here. I'm loving the support and loving what you guys are doing. So yeah, Groove, really, really handy because I think one of the biggest issues in most modern electronic music is that everything's over quantized. Everything is too perfect. And when things are too perfect, it's really hard to feel them. It feels a little sterile. This is especially true, I found, if you are making music for people to dance to. And I think that when you're making music for people to dance, you kind of have to do a balancing act because you need to make yeah, you got a question, just toss it in the chat, Chuck. You need to make music that people who are really good at dancing can dance to, but you also need to make music that people who suck at dancing can dance to. And so you need to have certain parts of your song be very kind of quantized and on the grid and on time, so the people who suck at dancing can keep on time. But then you also want to have things that are purposely off time, so the people who are really good at dancing can like pick up on all that stuff and groove out to it. So I think Groove is really helpful for adding that little extra bit of detail and shine to make your track more interesting. So both bad dancers and good dancers can dance to it. Cool. So if I'm going to apply some Groove, we'll get to the global Groove section in just a second. Yeah, I made a video about this, but we're gonna cover it and talk a little more about it. So we got a Groove folder right here. They used to be organized in different folders, and now it's just a big list of grooves. But say I want to, this is an 8th note clip, say I want to apply an 8th note groove to it. Here is some 8th note swings. The first number here is the grid size. So these are all 8th note swings. These are all 16th note swings. These are 32nd note swings. And the number here is the amount as a percentage, where 50% is basically nothing and 75% is a lot. So if I want to apply this groove to it, I can click on it, I can hear it. If I want to apply it to this clip, I can either double click on it, I can click and drag it over here, or I can click and drag it down here, or I can hit this little squiggly line guy, open up the groove pool, and then toss it in here. If you add a swing or just a groove file into your groove pool, it'll show up in this drop-down menu here. So if I want to apply this 8th note swing, we can now hear it. And if I want to see it, we can see it changes the timing of some of my shakers to be a little bit off time. However, it seems like you kind of knew that. That's kind of like the basics of how Groove works. And I Command Z to undo that to take it back to, it still looks quantized, but we can still hear the groove because it's set over here. These settings here get to be really interesting. There's a lot of things we can do here. And you don't need to use these settings to make Groove work for you, but I think they're pretty cool. The first one is the bass size. This is basically going to be the grid that it's going to be quantizing to. Because this is an 8th note swing, this will default to be 8th notes. Because this one here is a 16th note swing, it'll default to be 16th notes. So nothing too surprising there. The quantize control is really interesting. This is going to quantize your clip first and then apply the groove. this is really helpful if you like, you know, I plugged in these notes with my mouse, but say I didn't, say I was on my MIDI controller and I like, right, I recorded that and the timing was a little bit off. If I like did something like this and hit this button, and like some of my timing was a little bit off time, if you turn up the quantize, it will move it on the grid first and then move it back off of the grid when it applies the groove. So generally you don't need that. Oftentimes when you are applying groove, it's something that's already been pre-quantized, but if you wanted to add quantize, you can do that here. The timing control is really interesting. This is essentially like a dry wet for groove. So at 100%, it's going to be, in this case, 68% groove. Do this. But if I start turning the timing control down, it's going to become less and less obvious. So again, think of this kind of like a dry wet. If I turn it all the way down to 0, it's not doing anything anymore. So this basically like moves the timing backwards and forwards. And again, if I commit this at 100%, we can see it's super obvious. But if I commit this at like 20%, we can see it's very, very subtle. So think of the timing control like a dry wet. It's the amount that you want to use. One of the techniques that I use a lot for trying to figure out how much groove I want to use is if you start with a really heavy groove, like in this case, a 73% groove, you can then use this to kind of move it back and forth until you find the exact right amount, which can be really fun. We have a random control. This is going to randomize the timing. So if I turn this up really high and then I commit this, the timing is going to be a little random for each one of your notes if you want. Again, just move things off the grid a little bit if you want to. And then we have a velocity control. So these groove files mostly, not all the time, but usually contain velocity information as well. So if we like put this over here, we can see this has not a lot of velocity information. It has a little bit of velocity information. So we can choose the amount that the velocity will affect it once we commit it. So if we turn the velocity all the way up and we hit commit, it doesn't really do a lot because this specific groove did not have a lot of velocity. But other grooves, especially some of the like Latin percussion ones and like all the different like this one, for example, we do this one, we turn up the velocity and we commit it, we can see it also affects the velocity. So most grooves are primarily concerned with timing information, but some of them also have velocity information as well, and we can control the amount of velocity information here, including inversing it to be negative. That's basically the idea here. One of the important things about the groove pool that is unfortunate is you cannot automate any of these parameters. They're all just, they are whatever they are. So if you did want to automate it, you could like sit here with your mouse as you resampled it to audio, and then that would work. However, the global groove amount is effectively this timing control, but for every single groove in your song. It means if we had this one groove on this clip, and we had a different groove on this clip, or even different grooves on different tracks, this global groove amount is the same thing as controlling this, but for all of these at the same time. The two important things to know about this is, number one, is if you commit a groove, so if I hit commit here, this does not do anything anymore because you've already committed the groove and therefore it's not doing anything. So if you commit it, it doesn't help you at all. But if you have not yet committed, this is basically like a dry wet control for all of your grooves across all of your clips, across all of your tracks. The other important thing about this, besides the fact that it goes up to 130%, so you can get even more noticeable grooves, is you can automate this in the master track over here. Yeah, so the global one controls this control here for timing for any non-committed groove on any track, on any clip. And you can automate it. So you could have a clip start or have your song start with a low amount of groove, and then over time the groove could fade in or fade out or whatever you want. Pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, this is essentially the global groove amount. It's probably the same control. So DJ Emo is asking in chat what kind of music you guys are making, which is actually a question that I am also very curious about. So I've been getting I've had a lot of chats with different members of chat at different times, both in YouTube chat and Discord, about music that people are into. And I'm finding that my chat has got amazing taste in music. So I'm super curious to hear what you guys are making, or what kind of styles you guys are into. But does that kind of answer your questions about Groove Pool and what like the settings are within the groove and the global groove amount? There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with this, especially if you are, like I said, if you're making any kind of dance music, you should become friends with the Groove Pool because it can make a huge, huge difference. It's one of those like really subtle things that makes all the difference in the world to me. Adds a little bit of humanization to pretty much anything. Yeah, I'm also I'm always in the process of making videos, obviously. So yeah, I'm curious to see what people are into for what styles of music they're making. That way, I can make some videos that are based around that. Seems like we got a lot of like IDM, a little bit of techno, a little bit of house. Occasionally, we get some hip hop in here, which is interesting because a lot of times when I'm teaching lessons to people in real life, I tend to get a lot of people who are into dubstep. But on YouTube, I have not found a lot of people who are super into dubstep. Yeah, a lot of glitchy stuff people are into, it seems like, which is awesome because glitchy, weird, experimental IDM stuff is definitely a big part of what I do in my background and where I've come from musically. Cool. I think I caught up to all the questions in chat. If I didn't, let me know. Like that was like a nice medium dive into groove. The other thing about groove that is often underappreciated is you can extract grooves from anything you want. So just like I have a giant folder of acapellas, I also have a giant folder of classic drum breaks, and I don't remember where I found this. I just downloaded it off the internet at some point. And the nice thing about these drum breaks is I don't always want to sample them. Something like this has a really nice groove to it. Has a really solid, like interesting feel. And you can actually see like the timing of this snare is like visibly off. It's visibly late. And that's part of what gives it this nice kind of like loose feel. So if you just right click on this and hit extract grooves, it will make a groove file for you. And so here is the extracted groove and the timing and velocity of that, which then means you have you can then apply that to your own drum beat. So you get this like nice realistic feel. So if you don't want to sample somebody else's drum beat, but you want to get that nice kind of like classic drum break feel, you can extract the groove out of somebody else's drum beat and then toss it in your own track. Yeah, and if you extract it, it automatically puts it in the groove pool for you, so then you can apply it to wherever you want. So Henry, one of the videos I was going to film today, but I didn't have time to, maybe I'll film it tomorrow morning, is, and you guys can chat, let me know if you're interested in this. I want to make a video that is about like ways to deal with writer's block or what to do when you get stuck. I feel like a lot of the videos I've been doing on the channel have been very kind of like technically oriented. So I'm going to do some more kind of like philosophical, like the art of making music and the kind of like emotional, mental well-being and what you can do to kind of like get through those points. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know, and I will probably film that tomorrow morning because I meant to do it today. What's up, Jordan? How's it going? Been a while. So Cods was asking about, I'm just calling you Cods, even though I don't know if that's how you're supposed to say it, was asking about autofilter. I'm assuming autofilter versus using other EQs. Specifically, I think the two that always kind of I end up using a lot are EQ8 versus autofilter. EQ8 I think of more for clarity. You're using this as a way to like, enhance certain frequencies or detract from certain frequencies, like being really precise and more as a like scalpel to make something really clear. Whereas the auto filter is going to do similar kind of functionality. It's also going to be allowing you to turn things down at certain frequencies. But this is more for motion, or what I think of as like adding fun changes to frequencies. Whereas this is like kind of dry and technical. This is a bit more like playful in terms of the application of how you use it. So the main thing about autofilter is you're going to have all your basic filter types in here. So you got your low pass, you got your high pass, you got your band pass, you got your notch, and your morphing filter. If you guys are not using the morphing filter, you should get on the morphing filter. You use this setting here, you get a morph knob, which switches between low pass into band pass, into a high pass, into a notch. So you basically get all of them, which is really, really fun for a variety of situations. But in terms of like practical application and when you use it, mostly for doing things like filter sweeps. So if you want something, if you have something that's looping and you want it to start off kind of muted or far away, and you want it to like slowly bring in it over time. Great for that kind of thing. It'd probably sound even better on something like this drum beat. And again, making it move over time. Have it fade in and out, which is a fade in, fade out you've heard a million times in a million different songs. Really common. So adding motion or movement to your sound using filters is really where I think autofilter shines. In this case, I'm just using the low pass, but you could do a similar thing with like a high pass. To add some nice kind of like character with your sound in terms of how it moves. The other situation where this is really useful, it has a built-in LFO. So this is going to essentially move your filter up and down over time. You can hear it moving up and down. And you can sync it to the grid. Yeah, it's super useful for dubstep, although a lot of times you're going to use a filter with a bit more settings than autofilter for dubstep. So built-in LFO can be really nice. You can also do some like really nice like pad sounds with it. So if you have, any synthesizer, having a really slow LFO to make it move up and down can be really, really useful. So motion and movement, the LFO is automatically attached to your filter frequency. So let me put this on MIDI track. Here. I mean, Wavetable already has a really nice built-in filter, but let's pretend that I'm not using Wavetable. All right, I'm getting the thing where my mic's still working. So here, sometimes YouTube gives me this little like spinning ball of death, and that means my microphone dies. But I have a sound like this. You just get nice little motion in there. Automating that around, super easy for doing lots of different kinds of sound design. The distortion modes, which I think a couple people, okay, cool. Which a couple people are mentioning, these are built into almost every filter in Live now. These are basically different modelings based off of different analog filters. So MS2 is the MS20. One of these is a Moog filter. I forget which is which. But if you turn this on, not only does it change the sound a little bit, but you also get this nice built-in drive control, which can really help beef up your sound, add a little distortion. Sounds really dope, and they all sound a little bit different. You can actually see it when I switch between some of these. The curve of the filters here changes a little bit depending on which one you're using. And then there's also a built-in sidechain. People always forget the sidechain is on the auto filter, but this is a really handy tool for getting motion. You can basically like make your filter move up or down when it receives an audio signal from another track. So that's kind of the case study usage for the auto filter. Like I said, it's EQ is for precision and dialing things in, and the auto filter is for fun stuff. For just making things move around, fade ins, fade outs, all that kind of stuff. Wobbly stuff, really handy. All right, I need to catch up with the chat. Bummer, Jordan, I'm sorry to hear that you were also feeling the creative rut. I think it's just going around right now. It's just a hard time to be making music. Have you been working on your live setup at all, Jordan? I'd be super curious to see what you've been up to for your live looping. Okay, so DJ Emo is asking about the attack and the release on the sidechain. So I'm gonna have to set this up to make it work so we can actually hear what's going on. Let me just grab a drum rack here and just grab Beat Tools one. All right, so I'm just gonna do like a super basic 4 on the floor kind of thing. Something like that. And I'm going to use the sidechain function here, and the alpha down, to receive that audio signal from that kick drum. So in order to make this work, right now it's not going to do anything. There's no change, nothing's happening here. In order for this to actually receive this and make the filter move up or move down, you have to use this envelope control right here. So if I turn this up, each time there's a kick drum, it's going to move the filter frequency up. That. Kind of cool, because that means you can like sync up 2 sounds. If I go the other direction, each time the kick drum happens, it's going to move the other direction. That actually sounds dope. I really like that. And then the attack and the release are the speed with which this responds to the volume coming through the sidechain. So if I were to turn this up, it only maxes out at 30 milliseconds. Like the timing here is not super huge. It's never really made a huge difference in any of my sound design doing something like this. But this will theoretically make this move slower as it opens. Or change this. It sounds pretty cool. But that's what the attack and the release do here. All right, it's doing the thing again. Mic check. Hopefully this is still working. You still hear me? All right, let's see how long it takes for Yeah, don't underestimate the power of the sidechain auto filter on like a bass sound. Make this nice kind of like super low end kind of thing. What's up? Keep calm. Welcome. Does that answer everybody's questions about autofilter? Anything else autofilter stuff going on? Really fun device. Probably one of my like top 5 most used audio effects, because there's so many situations when you just need that little bit of filtering, but you don't need to like go all the way into EQ8 and do like lots and lots of like tweaking and messing around with things. Really just versatile, easy to use, just a Swiss Army knife of EQing. So I use this quite a bit. Really fun effect. All right, now we got tons of people in here. Let's what other questions you got? The autofilter is great. You can put a little reverb on this, a little hybrid reverb. If we put it, the kick sounds terrible compared to the bass. I'm gonna have to swap out that kick. Interesting. That's pretty cool. Probably a little crazier with this. Digging that. Normally don't put a whole lot of reverb on my bass sounds, but it definitely works for this kind of thing. I don't know what reverb wall is. Is that like a specific thing, or just using a bunch of reverb on stuff? Because I love making sounds that are walls of reverb, but I don't know if you're talking about something specific. I mean, I love overdoing it on reverbs. That's definitely been it's been a blessing and curse in my audio production life history, where I love reverbs to a fault. And so I've made a lot of songs that are based almost entirely around just like getting the perfect amount of reverb and the perfect like combination of reverb sounds going on. So I'll have to look into specifically what people are talking about with it, but okay, so you just mean like a bunch of reverb that's not muddy? Yeah, I think it's really tricky to do. I think it requires a lot of patience, and I think the 2 things you really need to watch out for is get your decay time just right and your dry wet just right, and then the rest is golden. So focus on those 2 parameters and making sure that those are dialed in super tight, and then EQ the crap out of it. So I can actually show you one of my kind of like traditional ways that I like to do reverbs is you won't be able to see it because it's behind my head, but using my return tracks. So not using this, but my kind of go-to chain is a reverb on a return track, followed by a pretty heavy EQ8, where I'll cut out basically anything below like 200 hertz, something like this. And then I will also compress it. And then I will also sidechain it to the kick. So that's kind of my like generic signal flow for one of my reverbs, where this one is going to be the kick sidechain, the drum kit, whatever. And that gets me this nice kind of pulsing wall of sound. Usually, traditionally, I've been using Valhalla Shimmer and then or Valhalla Vintage Reverb as my 2 kind of go-to reverbs. Although hybrid reverb is definitely making a lot more appearances now that Live 11 is out. Interesting. I'm curious to see what kind of hardware stuff you have set up. If you are, Jordan, if you're dealing with issues with audio interface disconnecting, try with a different USB cable. A lot of times, like a faulty USB cable will totally screw you over, or the USB port will also screw you over, and that's sometimes an issue that like you can just go into a computer shop and they can like just swap out the USB ports, but not replace anything else, and that oftentimes will solve it. Yeah, I'll show an example of what this will sound like in just a second, and then we can get into some drum compression, which is also a really fascinating topic. So if I have like a piano sound, turn off the auto filter, crank this guy up, and then I run it through that. This is my return track with the hybrid reverb. And crank this up to 100%. So when you're using a reverb on a return track, you want to make sure your dry wet is at 100%, and that way you can effectively use your send knob like a dry wet. And let's crank this up. Let's find a really over the top kind of reverb sound. That's kind of annoying because if I'm on the push, it's not letting me do both. Let me turn on this. Okay, something like that. So here, we're getting rid of everything below like 150, 200 hertz, and then we're gonna compress it. I like this compressor mode so I can see what's going on. That way we get plenty of volume coming through it. And then I'll sidechain it to kick here, which is like pretty self-explanatory. And I would actually oftentimes go even crazier with it, these settings. So you get these big, huge, reverby, echoey sounds, and if you need to EQ it, you can a little bit. Works even better with something like shimmer. There we go. Something like that. And then a heavy sidechain from the kick gets you the nice kind of pulsing. So your original sound, my piano, is not sidechained to the kick, but the reverb is sidechained to the kick. So you get this nice mixture of a nice bit of clarity with the original sound, whether it's a pad sound or a piano or whatever. And then you really heavy sidechain coming from the kick on the reverb, so you get this nice atmospheric pulsing motion behind it, which sounds really cool. All right, we got some drum compression stuff. All right. So attack and release, funny that you mentioned it, keep calm, is 100% the most important thing when it comes to drum compression, in my opinion. So let me get a slightly different drum kit. See what this one sounds like. Cool, that'll work. So if we are going to compress the drums, in my opinion, one of the biggest mistakes people make is if you're going to be compressing, like say for example our snare here, if I turn this down, even with the makeup gain turned on, actually let's keep it off right now. If we have a very fast attack here, we're going to be turning the volume down of our initial hit, right? Our initial transient, which is going to make it just seem less powerful. So what we want is we want to be able to maintain the volume of our initial transient, of our initial hit, while also compressing the tail. So I found that by giving it a little bit of attack here, so here we're losing that initial transient. By turning this up to, I don't know, somewhere between like 5 to 20 milliseconds, 20 would be a lot. like this, or something like that. Here, it's subtle, but we're losing a lot of our initial hit, our initial transient. And here we're maintaining a lot more of it. So you can see how much gain reduction we're getting right now versus if I move this up to like, I don't know, 5 to 10 milliseconds, we're not getting nearly as much gain reduction. So giving it a tiny bit of attack allows the initial hit to go through the compressor without being super compressed, and then applying the compression to the rest of it. So that I think is the real key here. Release to me for drums is important, but it's not nearly as important. To me, getting the attack setting just right is going to make all the difference in the world for you to be able to maximize your impact of your transient while also like maintaining and getting a nice kind of like full, rich, compressed sound. And I think it depends a lot on the transient of the sound, what you're using. So oftentimes I will have individual compressors for each sound, especially for kick and snare. For hi-hats, I'm not quite as picky about my compression settings. Hi-hats are kind of just, as you can hear the hi-hats, then that's all you really need. But kick and snare, you need to have a lot of impact to it, right? So I'm going to have individual compressors with customized attack and I guess kind of also customized release for individual important sounds within my drum rack. And then I'm also going to be having, so in this case, this would be here on my snare. I'm also going to be doing, more kind of like bus or grouped based compression on the whole thing. Generally, I like using glue for that. Glue compressor on the whole thing. But you don't have to. You can use the regular compressor and also get away with it. Same thing here. Give it a little bit of attack and then kind of like customize your settings from there. And a lot of times I'll just like keep the release set on auto and that works totally fine. But don't overthink it with compression on drums. You're really just trying to make sure you can like hear everything. And again, try to like maximize that volume without losing the clear transients. Hey Anton, how's it going? So many people showed up today. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. And I'm gonna keep up with chat. So the other option you have here is parallel compression. Parallel compression on drums works really, really well. I don't know if you've tried this out yet or not. Essentially, the idea is that you have one signal that is your dry signal, that's just a non-compressed drum sound. And then parallel to that, you have your compressed drum sound. And the easiest way to do that is using your return tracks. So you could essentially put your compressor on a return track. I know you can't see my return tracks because it's behind my head. But if I toss a compressor in there, and then I can use this send knob to basically send some of my drum signal over to my compression return track and use this again, kind of like a dry wet. So if I want more of that compressed sound, I turn this up more. If I want a little bit less of it, and it gives you a really nice, easy way to control the amount of compression that you're getting. And if you change your mind, it's really easy just to tweak it a tiny little bit. And if you do so on the return track, you can have some like pretty crazy intense compressor settings because again, you can mix the amount of the compression you're getting by adjusting your send knob. So also when you do this, your drums tend to just get really loud. So watch out for that. You probably need to turn the volume of your drums down a bit because you're getting essentially two drum signals. One dry drum signal from this track right here, and then one compressed signal coming from your return track. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit, and probably go a lot deeper into drum compression. It's like a pretty deep topic. It also depends a lot on, again, what kind of style of music you're making. If you're making really over the top EDM, you want to like go super hard on those compressor settings. But if you're making like hip hop or anything else like that, you can go decently hard, but you don't need to like overdo it. Sometimes you can intentionally overcompress drums. I think a lot of times with like acoustic drum samples, if you're using like, like the Abbey Road drums in Contact or something like that, that have this really nice kind of acoustic feel, you can like overly crank things through the compressor, and actually it sounds really great. So you can get some really big, huge drum sounds that way. Oh yeah, there's a million different ways to kind of go about routing and compressing drums, but I find that individual compression for your important drum sounds, a little bit of glue compressor on the group, parallel compression if you have not tried it yet. That's a great way. If your drums are just sounding too small, parallel compression is a great way just to beef them up real quick. All right. Trying to catch up with the chat here. Anton was asking about, is there a way to use Redux and make it sound like an old school sampler convincingly? That is a fantastic question. I would have to do some research into exactly what kind of sampling settings an old school sampler like an MPC or something like that would actually have on it. I'm pretty sure the sample rate is going to be more or less the same. I don't think they were using like a lower sample rate, although I could be wrong about that. And it'd mostly just be playing with your bit depth for the most part, so they might have a lower bit depth. I don't know. I'd have to look into the settings. They're 12-bit, yeah. So it might not sound quite the same, but you could literally just grab a Redux and just change your bit depth to 12 and see where that gets you. I don't know if it'll be super accurate. And then you could also do the same thing where you just subtly turn this down, so like to like 20K, like. Yeah, you can hear like a tiny bit of fuzz in there. I don't know if you guys can hear it through YouTube or not. In this versus that. Something like that, where you really subtly change these, because if you go too low, it just sounds really digital. It's not what you're going for. You just want that like little bit of crunchiness. I would probably do something kind of like this, where you set your rate to like 20K and your bit depth to 12. But I would have to look into what kind of settings they actually have on like old school samplers and see roughly what those settings are at. But that's probably what I'd go through. And then, of course, if it gets a little too much, you can also just adjust the dry wet control to taste. So Juicebox said more compression means better music. I think that is sometimes true. I think that's a pretty hot take. I think a lot of music I hear right now is super over compressed, and it actually really detracts from the music. But also I hear a lot of fantastic music that is also very compressed. So I would be curious to hear more about your thoughts about the relationship between compression and making better music. Yeah, plug-in alliance channel sip for also kind of lo-fi, low quality could be really cool. Or the vinyl distortion. I feel like if you're going for that kind of like old school sampler thing, Redux actually might be a little better than the vinyl distortion. But I suppose you can get similar results. You'd have to like have really low settings to get something that gets you that kind of lo-fi thing. I feel like this is going to be a lot harder to use to get something similar to Redux. Is my hair looking cool? I think my hair always looks crazy. So I'm trying to look at myself in the little camera thing. I definitely don't feel like my hair looks cool, but I'm glad you're enjoying it, Bishop. This has been a dope stream so far. You guys have had some really awesome questions. I really appreciate it. Since I have a bunch of people here right now, I do want to give a shout out to the Discord that was just started. The link should be in the video description if you want to come check it out. We got a few channels going, talking about different music, people sharing their own music, sharing other kind of music they're into. So if you want to get in there, that would be awesome. All right. Who else has got questions for me? What else? What else you guys wondering about? Bishop, how are you doing today? Yeah. This has been a super fun stream so far. And my mic has not died once. So that's also very fun for me. All right, let me get rid of some of the stuff we're not using anymore. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Go back to playing some stuff. I know what this sound needs. Unsynced arpeggiator. All right, what if I do a little MIDI envelope here? That's a fantastic question. So how do you go about teaching group compression to a student who is unfamiliar with compression and its basic uses? So I've often found that when I'm teaching, you want to kind of like have building blocks. So you want to start with like a basic concept and make sure that people understand like just the foundation of what you're talking about. So I would first make sure they understand just what a compressor is, how it works, threshold, attack release ratio, all that kind of stuff. Because there's no way they're going to understand group compression without understanding just the basics of what an actual compressor does. And compressors are one of the most confusing. Oh, who wrote the basics? Okay. In that case, I think drums are probably the best. Either drums or if they're making bass music, a bass group is probably the best example of situations where those would be really relevant. Because again, with drums, you have all your individual compressor settings for your individual sounds, and then you're trying to kind of like squeeze them together and get that nice amount of dialed in dynamic range between all the various elements. So I'll demonstrate it probably with drums as probably the starting point, and then kind of go from there. Or like I said, if they're into bass music and they do a lot of like bass sound design, they have like 20 different bass tracks if they're call and response bass line, demonstrate it with something like that. And that way they can kind of see how you have all these disparate sounds and some might be quiet and some might be loud, and you want to dial them all into roughly the same range and make them all sound like they belong together. That's probably the other example I might use for a situation like that. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything like more specific than that, but I think that for a lot of times for moving into concepts like that, like group compression or bus compression, also maybe combine it with like other bus-based processing that you're doing. So if you're doing like bus EQing or even like, other kind of things that you put together, like this idea of like processing things as a group to make them sound cohesive, and then use compressors as part of that would probably be the way I would talk about it. That's a good question, though. Yeah, if you guys got more questions, feel free to just toss them in chat. What I'm going to do with this is convert it Yeah, so reverb on drums is one of those things where subtlety is super key. I oftentimes have a dedicated return track just for reverbs on my snare, and then I'll oftentimes have like a very subtle separate reverb for the rest of the drum sounds because I want my snare reverb to be perfect. So I have to dial that in separately from everything else. Lower. I don't know what I'm going for. I like that sound. If you guys have not used the MIDI envelope, this is really, really handy for situations like this where I want my arpeggiator to move over time. Nice, yeah, I like that. 5% of room verb to your drum bus before compressing it to hell. That sounds pretty spot on to me. I like that. Faster. How come it's not always going to the same amount? But yeah, MIDI envelope, super fun effect that often gets forgotten about because everybody uses the envelope follower, but that only responds to audio, whereas the MIDI envelope responds to MIDI. Oh, it has the velocity tracking. That's awesome. I actually like that quite a bit. It doesn't respond to aftertouch though, unfortunately. Let's see what happens. There we go. That's much. That's cool sound. I actually like this. I'm gonna save this as reminds me of a sound from a Teflon Tel Aviv song. Teflon Tel Aviv song. Cool. You guys in chat still there? Anybody still out there? I feel like we covered a lot of stuff today, which I'm pretty stoked about. So I'm one of the things I'm trying to gear towards once I have a little bit more time is doing like kind of like Team Supreme sample pack song challenges where I release a sample pack on like Discord or something like that, and then everybody has to make a song using those samples, and then people post them and like we can talk about them or release them or whatever. So sample packs slash sample pack song contest are in the future for sure. It's definitely something I want to be doing, which I think would be really fun. I just need to find time to make some samples. If anybody out there is interested in getting on that and like just wants to make a bunch of samples, and then we can figure something out and release them out to people, and then like I'm doing the song feedbacks on Fridays, so make it part of that or something like that. Yeah, sample packs, super into that idea. Because I like the idea of people being able to like get creative and kind of work together and stuff like that. So Henry's asking about how I organize my collections with tags. Unfortunately, they keep resetting the names on them because sometimes my hard drive gets unplugged and then it resets some of this. But I color code everything. So when I'm producing, my drums are always purple. So anytime I'm doing something with the drums, I put it in the purple folder. My basses are always blue, so anything I do anything with bass, it goes into the blue folder. My synths are always green, so synth presets go in the green folder. Again, it's missing a bunch of these stuff because it keeps resetting. My sampled instruments are yellow, so those go in there. My effects are orange, so those go in there. And then red I have for Max for Live devices. So again, it's missing a bunch of stuff, but my Max for Live devices go here. And then gray I just have for like weird random stuff that I'm either working on for like teaching or stuff like that. So that's generally how I organize them. And when I am working in my template, when I open up in Live, all the colors of these match with the colors of the tracks that I'm using. So color coding is big for me. That's how I have them all. But I've seen a lot of people organize them in lots of different ways. They work pretty well. And like in my drums folder, for example, I have a whole kicks folder of kicks that I like. I can toss in there. But I think it's really kind of up to you. As long as you're using them, as long as you remember to use them, the collections are really, really helpful. Once you get used to kind of like where you put stuff and how you organize it. Now, a lot of times, as soon as I make a patch or a preset or something that I like, I will automatically just tag it into one of the folders. I got a bunch of stuff that's not tagged yet, but that just makes your life way easier just to get it in there. Sure, yeah, Juicebox. So where do I start? The very beginning. I went to a music production school called Pyramid in San Francisco many, many years ago. And then after I finished their program where I learned like Pro Tools, Logic, Reason, all that kind of stuff, I came back as the TA, the teacher assistant for their Ableton class, just kind of for fun. I just like volunteered and I just kind of like hung out and retook the Ableton class there a few times. And eventually it came to the point where their live instructor moved out of the country to go to grad school. And so I kind of stepped in as their Ableton 101 and 201 teacher. I just happened to be kind of like right place, right time. I never really intended to teach, but it just kind of happened and I really enjoyed it. So I taught there for many years. I taught online for them and then moved to Colorado in about 2015 and started the Boulder Ableton user group. And so I was kind of like organizing local events here in Colorado. And around that time, they had a certification event in like 2016. And the way you get certified by Ableton is, number one, you have to wait until they have a certification event in your country. So they do them pretty sparingly, so every couple of years usually, in different countries around the world. So you have to send them an application and a video and a resume and like all this stuff. They review that. If you pass that, they do a phone interview with you, which is super stressful. And if you pass the phone interview, then you have to go to a certification event in your country. So I flew to LA and did a weekend-long certification event, and I can't tell you anything about it. It's like a secret thing. But that was really amazing. And then if you pass that, then you become Ableton certified. Yeah, that's kind of the process behind it. But generally, when you apply, they're looking for people who are active in the community, so people who are like running events, releasing content on YouTube or whatever, who are already teaching, working at schools, universities, wherever. So it helped that I'd already been doing that for a long time. But yeah, really fun process. I highly recommend it if you are somebody who likes helping people and wants to be more involved in the Ableton world and community. It was a really amazing experience and is still really amazing. And yeah, highly recommend all around. But they don't certify a lot of people, which is also partially why it's kind of cool. Because you're like automatically plugged in with all the other certified trainers. So if I like were to go to, LA or New York or New Orleans or wherever, I could like have a connection with the certified trainer there. It's a really, really awesome community of people. Everybody's super cool, and yeah, it's just highly recommended if you're into that kind of thing. And then since then, I've taught a bunch of different places. I was running an Ableton school here in Colorado for a little bit, and then about 6 months ago, I kind of switched over to doing Catalyze, which is kind of my own thing. It's been pretty great so far. Does that kind of answer your question? If you want to know more info about it, if you go to the bottom of the Ableton page, the Ableton website, there is a link that says become a certified trainer or something like that, and then you just got to like pay attention to that to figure out when the next certification events are going to be. Hey Adrian, how you doing? Welcome. So drum kits for free. If you are already using Live, my favorite series of drum kits are in the Beat Tools Live Pack. So if you go into your Live Packs, and if you don't already have Beat Tools installed, you can scroll to the bottom where it'll say available packs and just click on the Beat Tools pack. Pretty great drum racks are already built into that, and it's free if you own Live. I think any version of Live, it automatically comes with that. So that'd be the first place I would check if you haven't already. Other than that, I'm honestly not super sure where you'd get a bunch of drum kits for free. I'm sure if some Googling would help you out there. I usually build my own drum kits from scratch, so I will just start with an empty drum rack, and then I will load up samples individually into it. So in that case, I would just go find a bunch of like free kick drum samples, and then I got a bunch of kick drums, and then a bunch of free snare samples, and then just drag them in. So the drum kits are nice because they're all kind of pre-built for you, but building them from scratch is fun, and you get a lot of customization when it comes to kind of building it and putting it together. But other than that, a lot of drum kits, like I have a million drum kits and I have no idea what any of these are or what they do, but these all come from different Live packs. So if you own the Suite version of Live, you get like a million different packs, and different packs will contain different drum kits. Other than that, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I'd have to look into it. I haven't downloaded drum kits for a long time. But there's lots of resources out there where people have free kits and things you can download for drum racks. But most people, in terms of like getting samples and things like that, they're just going to splice.com, and that's where you can just download a bunch of individual drum samples or things like that. I don't think they have any like drum racks, but you can get your samples there, and you just $8 a month, and you get a subscription for tons of samples. Cool. So any other final questions before we wrap it up for the evening? If you guys are still around, on Friday, I'm doing my song feedback streams where you can just send me your songs and I will listen to them on stream and I will give you feedback on them. And that happens at 5 o'clock Mountain Time on Friday, so same time as this stream basically. And if you can't make it to that stream, you can submit your song early through the Discord. I'm really pushing the Discord today. You can submit your song early, and that way I will review the song even if you can't be there live for it, and then you can watch the video later on, because all of these live streams are uploaded and on the channel, so you can watch them later. Cool. So unless anybody's got anything else, oh, Tristan, you're just in time for the last couple minutes of the stream. If you got any questions, get them in now before I head out to eat some dinner. I'll stick around for a few minutes in case people got any final questions. But this has been a dope stream. I really appreciate everybody for being here. A lot of really great questions. A lot of people helping each other out, which is what I love to see. And I will be doing this every Tuesday and Friday. Well, yeah, Tristan, take your time. I'm not in a huge hurry to go anywhere, so figure out how you want to phrase your question, and I'm going to hang out here and play some weird noises. I like that sound a lot. My favorite sound of the day. All right, so Tristan asking, what's the difference on how something actually sounds and feels can be tricky? For example, I can feel the clap on 240 event take us into the louder it is. So something actually sounds and how it feels. Okay, so I think what you're kind of getting at, yeah. So I think what you're getting at is kind of like relative volumes when it comes to mixing, which to me is the core essence of mixing altogether. So our brains naturally gravitate towards whatever's loudest, right? Just a survival instinct. There's a loud sound, it's dangerous or it's important, so we pay attention to it, right? So when you are trying to direct your listener's attention to certain sounds, they need to be louder than everything else. So I think this is where you're kind of getting at. So you want to make it sure that, or you feel like sometimes things feel either louder than they should or not as loud as they should when you're working on your mixes. And I think there are a number of ways to kind of play around with that. Number one is just as an exercise, just a practice. When you are listening to music in general, both your own mixes and other people's songs, close your eyes and think about what is grabbing my attention. What is the focus of the mix right now? And it'll vary depending on the style of music. A lot of times in like electronic music, it's going to be like kick drum is the most important thing. And then after that will be like bass. And then after that is like the melody or snare somewhere in there. And then as you're doing this to your own music, ask yourself the question, is that what I want my audience to be focusing on at that time? And that's a really good exercise. And then do that for like the loudest sound, second loudest sound, third loudest sound, and go through everything and make sure everything in your mix is in the right order of priority. And it seems like what you're dealing with is like your clap is either not as loud as you want it to be or it's too loud. And so just using volumes to kind of direct your listeners' attention to different sounds within your mix can be really, really important. Other things that you can do kind of along the same lines are EQs. If you have something like your clap and it's not cutting through the mix the way you want it to, that clap primarily exists in a specific frequency range. So if I grab like a clap sample, like this, we were to take a look at in U8 on something like this. Not the right sound. So something like a snare or clap is like a pretty wide frequency range, but there's going to be a primary area that's going to live in, which is going to be right in here, like this little spike here and this kind of area. Like this is not as important. Like that still sounds the same. And this is kind of important. But here's where like the impact of our clap is. So if you were to boost this a little bit here, it gets you more of that impact. So you could give it a little bit of boost here, and then conversely on other sounds in your mix, do the opposite, where you turn it down a little bit just in that frequency range. Will help it kind of like pierce through the mix a little bit more. I think a lot of times when mixing, you're talking about like frequencies competing with one another. So the more you can remove frequencies and the more you can kind of like split things out in different directions and different places, the more you can clearly hear something when there's lots of stuff going on. So using volumes, using EQs, and then negative space is also really important. This also has to do this idea of like competition. So for example, when your clap is happening, if you want this to be really loud and really clear, get rid of everything else. If it's not vital and if it's not important to the song and to the mix, delete it out of there for even just like a couple split seconds of the initial part of this clap. And that'll make it so your clap is not competing with anything else, so it fits through there a little bit more. So the more you can remove competition from your mix, the clearer it is to hear things. So if you want something to pierce through the mix a bit more, get rid of the competition through either EQs or in a lot of cases just deleting things. And then also be really, really precise with your volumes and making sure that something that you want to be, very noticeable, like a clap, that you probably need to make it louder than you think it needs to be. The two rules for mixing drums that I always end up doing are your snare or your clap should be louder than you should make it louder than you think you need to. And your hi-hats can be quieter than you think you need to. And that just in general has always kind of worked for me when it comes to mixing drums. So I'm not sure if that answers your question at all, but hopefully that is kind of useful for you. But when in doubt, close your eyes, listen to the mix, listen to the priority of sounds from loudest sounds to least loudest sounds, and try to make sure things are roughly in the right order in terms of what's the loudest and therefore what grabs the most attention in your song. Cool. Again, yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I'm not really sure, but that's definitely something that's relatable in terms of like certain things not being present in the mix or being too present in the mix. Keep Calm was asking about what kind of samples for Discord. Are you asking about the sample pack challenge idea I was thinking about? Because honestly, I had not thought about that a whole lot. Probably just like a smattering of a few different things. Probably some drum samples, maybe a few bass samples, maybe a few melodic samples. I don't know, 15 to 20 samples of different interesting things. Maybe some like ambient noises, some sound effects, just so some variety, and that way people can take it in different directions if they want to. Cool. Well, I think that's going to be more or less it for this evening. Again, I appreciate all you guys showing up and having really awesome questions for me. I'm going to give chat, I don't know, 30 to 45 seconds to catch up because I know the stream is a little bit behind where chat is at, or vice versa. And then I'm going to call it for the evening. But again, thank you guys so much. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I will hopefully see you again on Friday. If not, I'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place. I'll hang out for a couple minutes or another minute or so before I call it for the evening. See you, Chuck. Thanks for hanging out. Thank you, Tristan. Again, I really appreciate it. And Jordan, oh, there's all these people still here. I didn't know. I thought everybody had left already. Cool, awesome. Yeah, I think it'd be really fun to just start doing some sample pack challenges real soon. Awesome. All right, everybody, have a good night, and I will see you all later.